Welcome to Latchkey History, and welcome to the poisoned years of American Prohibition. At the time, no one knew it, but in the bustling saloons of 19th century America, a storm was brewing. It began slowly as whispers in church pews and women's parlors. Tales of broken homes, abusive husbands, and ruined lives, all blamed on one single source. That source was alcohol. As time went on, the Temperance Movement, born in the early 1800s, gathered momentum like a steam locomotive. Pious reformers loudly preached the wickedness of spirits. They were led by women like Carrie Nation, who wielded her hatchet against bar mirrors and decried alcohol as the roots of countless societal ills. Among them, poverty, crime, and domestic violence. The movement painted vivid pictures of saloons as dens of vice, luring men from factories and farms into debt and despair. Organizations like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, founded in 1874, mobilized housewives and mothers. They argued that prohibition would protect families and elevate society. Alliances were built with evangelical preachers who thundered from their pulpits about the dangers of the demon rum. As the century progressed, the movement evolved from a moral suasion to political muscle. The Anti-Saloon League, founded in 1893 by Howard Hyde Russell, became a political powerhouse. The group operated like a modern lobby with relentless focus. They pressured politicians through dry voter blocs, endorsing candidates who pledged support for alcohol bans. By 1913, 9 states had gone dry, and the League pushed for a national amendment. They allied with progressives who were tackling child labor and corruption, suffragists like Susan B. Anthony, who linked women's rights to temperance, and industrialists like Henry Ford, who saw sober workers as more productive and reliable on assembly lines. In 1917, World War I ignited the fuse. Grain for beer was better used for bread to feed Allied troops. Anti-German hysteria followed the sinking of the Lusitania and the entry into war with the German Empire. German brewers such as Anheuser-Busch now became suspect. Patriotism fused with prohibitionism in the Wartime Prohibition Act in 1918. A year before, however, Congress passed the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The amendment banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. Ratified by 46 states, it took effect on January 17, 1920. The Volstead Act defined its regulation. Named after Minnesotan Congressman Andrew Volstead, it defined intoxicating liquors as anything over 0.5% alcohol. Prohibition had arrived and was hailed as a noble experiment by then-President Herbert Hoover. Supporters viewed it as a grand attempt to purify the nation and usher in an era of moral uplift. In the beginning, it seemed like a righteous cause. However, in the underbelly of America, another storm was now brewing. In cities like Chicago and New York, Prohibition birthed the roaring era of defiance. Speakeasies sprang up like weeds. Hidden bars flourished behind false walls in basements or attics. Liberated flappers in beaded dresses and bobbed hair danced the Charleston. Jazz horns roared in smoke-filled rooms as people sipped gin rickeys from teacups to fool any raiding Prohi agents. Bootleggers of the time became kings. Men like George Remus, a former pharmacist and lawyer turned king of the bootleggers. Remus bought distilleries under medicinal loopholes and amassed a fortune smuggling Canadian whiskey across the Great Lakes or by train. Al Capone, the scar-faced gangster from Brooklyn, now ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist. His empire, fueled by illegal breweries and abandoned warehouses and rum-running ships from the Bahamas, raked in an estimated $100 million annually. Valentine's Day 1929 marked the bloody peak of Prohibition. the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. That day, Capone's men, disguised as police, dispatched 7 rivals from Bugs Moran's North Side gang. Their bodies riddled with over 70 bullets symbolized the gang wars that would turn streets into battlegrounds and claim thousands of lives. Life during the dry years was a contradiction of glamour and grit. For the elite, it was cocktail parties and ornate mansions on Long Island. Doctors still prescribed medicinal whiskey for ailments like anxiety, issuing over 1 million gallons yearly. Sacramental wine also still flowed unchecked for rabbis and priests, leading to a surge in dubious congregations. But for ordinary folks, a drink was anything but safe. Poisoned hooch from industrial alcohol blinded or killed an estimated 10,000 people. Also, enforcement was a farce. The Prohibition Bureau, with just 1,500 agents for the entire country, was underfunded and riddled with corruption. Rural moonshiners in Appalachia and the South cooked corn mash in hidden copper stills. They then transported the product in high-speed cars. Agents would sometimes give chase, and these chases honed driving skills. Skills which would later formalize into the giant of NASCAR. Women, newly enfranchised by the 19th Amendment, found empowerment in the era. Some as gun-toting Molls like Virginia Hill, and others as reformers like Mabel Walker Willebrandt. For most, the positives and negatives blurred as crime soared, and many families suffered from bootlegger-related gang violence. By the late 1920s, obvious cracks appeared in the facade of Prohibition. The experiment began to sour amid widespread flouting of the law and blatant hypocrisy. Politicians like New York's Mayor Jimmy Walker preached dryness in speeches, all while wetting his whistle in private clubs. Even President Warren Harding kept a stocked bar in the White House, despite the ban. Adding to the madness, the Great Depression came in late 1929. Employment would hit 25%. Banks failed and bread lines stretched for blocks. The government, desperate for revenue, eyed the $500 million in lost annual taxes from legal alcohol. Savvy groups like the Association Against the Prohibition Amendment formed, founded by industrialists like Pierre DuPont. They argued persuasively that the ban bred disrespect for all manner of law. Instead of enlightening the masses, it had fostered a culture of corruption that eroded public trust in institutions. The once noble experiment had turned into a nightmare. Al Smith's failed 1928 presidential run as a wet Democrat from New York's Tammany Hall signaled shifting tides. Though he lost to the dry Herbert Hoover, Smith's campaign highlighted resentment against anti-government imposed morality. Women, once Prohibition's backbone, also began defecting in droves. In 1929, Pauline Sabin, a glorious Republican socialite and former Dry supporter, founded the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform. She would rally 1.5 million members with arguments that the ban harmed children by glamorizing crime and ultimately failing to curb drinking. Public opinion also changed as news spread. Editorials in papers like the New York Times decried the unholy alliance between bootleggers and corrupt officials. The climax came amid breadlines and despair. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt campaigned on repeal as part of his New Deal promises. He vowed to restore jobs and reopen breweries and distilleries to stimulate the industry and the economy. Elected in a landslide, carrying 42 states, he wasted no time. On March 22, 1933, he signed the Cullen-Harrison Act, legalizing 3.2% beer and wine immediately. Congress proposed the 21st Amendment in February 1933, which repealed the 18th. States would go on to ratify it via conventions in record speed, bypassing dry-dominated legislatures. On December 5, 1933, Utah cast the deciding vote, finally ending Prohibition after 13 tumultuous years. FDR famously quipped later in a radio address, "I think this would be a good time for a beer." The aftermath, however, lingered like a bad hangover. Organized crime, bloated by bootlegging profits, didn't vanish. Instead, it diversified into gambling rackets, labor unions, and the drug trade. Men like Lucky Luciano would restructure the mob into a commission to streamline efficiency. In 1931, Al Capone eventually fell not to murder charges, but tax evasion. Thanks to Eliot Ness's Untouchables, he would serve time in Alcatraz until 1939. The federal government expanded dramatically, birthing agencies like the FBI and the Alcohol Tax Unit, precursor to the ATF. Socially, drinking habits shifted forever. Speakeasy culture normalized mixed drinks. Cocktails like the martini and sidecar replaced straight shots. Also, women now drank publicly without stigma, accelerating gender equality in social spheres. Economically, alcohol taxes poured $250 million into federal coffers in 1934 alone, yet the scars remained. Over 10,000 dead from bad liquor, and cities across the nation scarred by gang violence. Prohibition taught humanity a bitter lesson. Morality can't be legislated top-down. Bans often breed thriving black markets, corruption, and unintended consequences. In the end, Americans' dry spell quenched not vice, but the illusion of a nation's purity. Thanks for watching the poisoned years of American Prohibition, and see you next time on Latchkey History.